So, I mean, does it jump out?
Okay, we are now live.
Yes, we're
I
live.
can look up, and actually I
So,
can go into
Karen,
Envision to see what at least what we budget.
The second blank,
It's the same name.
blank term will run.
It's one.
Okay, let's resume the meeting now that we're out of executive session. That's number 3 on the agenda is appointment of board member. The recommended action is approve the appointment of Dan Cash as a Board of Education member. Mr. Cash term will run from September 1st, 2020 through May 18th, 2021. May I have a motion, please? Thank you, Martha. Second, Dan.
Sure.
Any discussion? May I have a vote, please? All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Motion passes 6-0. Good of the cause. Receive any emails or
No.
telephone calls or telegrams?
They're in my lpcsd.org email.
Okay. Report, superintendent report.
Well, it's nice to see everybody, both in person and on screen. We also saw a number of people back today at the schools, and that is because today was the first day back for faculty and staff. When you think about how long it's been since we had people back in their classrooms getting ready for students to return, it does sort of stretch the mind, because it's been almost 6 months, and that's a new experience for all of us. So we did welcome back our staff and faculty today for the 2021 school year, and like I said, it was great to see everybody here. There were some things that were very similar to every year, and that includes happy faces, some with masks, but still you could tell they were happy. And many warm welcomes, as well as a special breakfast that was prepared in both schools, thanks to our cafeteria staff. But because this is a year that's unlike any other, our first day back was also a little bit different. There was no opening assembly typically in the auditorium. And you all know that the auditorium wouldn't have been a good place to host a meeting if we could have everybody in the same room, because it's under construction. We welcomed people back one at a time, and also through a welcome back video. And that welcome back video included a welcome back from Dr. Rick Preston, representing the Board of Education. So Rick did welcome back the entire faculty and staff for all of the board. So thank you for doing that.
Board Docs. I put the link down.
What's that?
The link for the videos on Board Docs.
The link for, oh, so you
video.
can see the video on Board Docs. That's what Karen's saying. Thank you, Karen. It also featured welcome back from Jenny Winch, who represented the faculty and the Lake Placid Education Association. She's co-president. And Cora Clark, representing the support staff and the CSEA, and she's the president of the CSEA. Finally, high school junior Caleb Myhill put together an 8-minute segment introducing our new faculty and staff, so that everybody who didn't have a chance to meet them in person would see new faces who will be working in the schools and in the school community this year. So thank you very much to Caleb. What a terrific job he does. And so you can see the whole video, which includes these other clips in there. It's posted.
It's in Board Docs.
In Board Docs in the superintendent's report.
It's under info for the board. I
Oh,
believe.
under info for the board. Okay.
Thank
So we may have been socially distant, but we do continue to be a warm and welcoming school community. And to all of our faculty and staff, welcome back. So our faculty and staff will be working to prepare the buildings and our buses for the start of the school year. And then and preparing for the big day, which is next Tuesday, when our students return after being away for almost 6 months. So it is a big day, and there's lots of work to be done. There's work in the classrooms. There's still, because of the construction, there's still much cleaning to be done. And we have a lot of people hard at work doing all those things right now. So this is a big week, and Tuesday's a big day. Other things I could mention, I want to mention the BOCES Capital Project. Dana Wood oversees our business office, and so he knows that we had a big moment in which we wrote our final check for the BOCES Capital Project. Now, you have to go back about 5 years to remember when this capital project became proposed. The BOCES have no ability to raise revenue on their own, so they took the big risk of going out to the districts and asking for our support, all the districts' support for a construction project that would benefit, in the end, students, including our students. But that's hard to do. BOCES typically don't pass capital projects because of that challenge, but they went out and did it. It was challenging for districts to consider how they were going to pay for it. It was very challenging for us to consider how we were going to pay for it. But this board, I think, did a really good job of identifying what funds that the board would be able to access in order to pay off these amounts over the course of 3 years. I believe it was about $1.5 million. Is that right? 1.4, 1.5 million, something like that, Dana. So we sent our final payment of $551,000 during the month of August. And just as a reminder, while this project was needed and it was important, it was never budgeted by us. And so a big challenge, we did have to rely upon our fund balance to cover the expense. And so you might recall that the board continued to maintain a fund balance in the unrestricted fund and to identify that as to be used for the BOCES capital project. And that's where it went to, or that's where it came from. Our community supported the project, our district committed to paying our share, and now our students are among those, our students, as well as the other students from this region, are among the beneficiaries. So congratulations, really. This is the first congratulations for completing a capital project. We do anticipate a second congratulations for completing a capital project later this calendar year. So cross your fingers. We're shooting for a December finish for our own capital project. And I think we can even celebrate more so now. That's going to be exciting. Last thing I'll talk about is reopening. And I don't have any really new information to share with you. We do continue to move forward with our reopening plans as we've articulated them. We did complete our online discussions with both the faculty and families, the community, really. And that last one was on Thursday, the 20th of August. So we did 4 of those meetings Zoom. They were typically about an hour, 15 minutes, an hour and a half. Some of you joined us. Some of you joined us multiple times. Thank you very much for that. But we did complete those. We answered a lot of questions. We received some good feedback. And now, right now, we do expect to see most of our students back in person with about, right now, the plan is for about 10% of those students to join us remotely. And then just one additional piece, because you may have heard that last week, yes, it was last Monday, I believe, Governor Cuomo announced publicly that that athletics would be allowed to restart. High school athletics would be allowed to restart. Interscholastic, including modified, allowed to restart on September 21st. And that did generate much discussion throughout the state. So the governor gave a green light to practices and competitions for cross country and soccer teams. And then yes, for practices, but not, but a different deadline or timeline for higher risk sports like football and volleyball. So those really haven't been approved right now. There is a tentative moving forward with cross country and soccer. However, those discussions aren't completed yet. New York State Public High School Athletic Association oversees interscholastic athletics. They've provided some public comments recently, but we also know that Section 7 in both leagues will be weighing in on this decision. As with most areas of schooling at this time, restarting athletics continues to be a work in progress. But that's where we are with the governor's statement about the 21st of September, and then work throughout the state on whether or how to implement that. So that's everything I have. Any questions or comments from anybody?
Roger,
Yes.
has there been any feedback or concern that you've heard from families just in regard to the situation in Elizabethtown and then also Essex County being added today to a Vermont list of a specific county in New York State that can't travel to Vermont? Will that impact us at all, do you believe, or?
Well, it could, but right now, what we're looking at is clearly a very difficult situation in Elizabethtown at the nursing home, centered on the nursing home. And, the question that people, when people bring it up, as you said, raising concerns, the question is whether or not any of that reaches to us. And so at this point, we haven't heard that we have any connections to that, but we continue to try and maintain our awareness about that so we can make a sound decision going forward.
Okay, thank you.
How's morale?
I would say morale is good, but I would not want to ignore that there's anxiety and tension over the pandemic and reopening schools throughout within this climate. So sure, yeah. But I have to say there are a lot of excited people today. A lot of people are excited to see students again in person, to put together their classrooms in a way that they feel are safe. Go into the kindergarten, first grade classrooms. They're setting up their rooms in a way that they feel that kindergartners and first graders who maybe enjoy physical contact or aren't always as controlled with their movements as maybe older kids might be. So they've put up some really nice movable barriers that they can provide for each kid. So every kid will have their little home, but will also allow them easy, quick contact with their teacher and their fellow students too. It actually looks pretty inviting in some of those classrooms. Others are still working on it. They're trying to figure out how to arrange desks and chairs and to make it all work. And in some cases, we're talking about spaces, use of different spaces that we won't be using because of the reopening plan and how we're limiting some movement. So use of some of the spaces like cafeteria space, art room, and we're talking about the elementary art room possibility, and other spaces that are available. So there's a lot of sort of looking at enrollment rosters and looking at how well we can maintain the physical distance that what we've put into our plan. For the most part, it looks like it's working very well. But sure, that's the whole point of today and the rest of the week, and the board did approve the extension of the preparation time at the last meeting, and everybody was very grateful for that, is to allow people that time to figure some of these things out. In addition to professional development, so they can really consider how to engage all their students. Remember, with 10% of the students learning remotely, that means that there's going to be sort of like our meeting today, people in person and some online all at the same time. And so they're working on that. They're working on how to operate within perhaps a different schedule, like at the middle and high school, where they're going to a modified block schedule. Those kinds of things. So they're both preparing professionally as well as preparing their physical classroom space.
Any other questions? Thank you.
Thanks.
Information for the board, there are several items. The NISBA convention, which is virtual this year, will be held over a 2-week period. The deadline for early bird registration is September 13th. If you are interested, please let Karen know.
We've approved up to 4 people to attend.
Correct. Good. Karen put in a reminder about the scheduled meeting in Wilmington on October 6th. That will obviously, unless something miraculous happens, we probably will not have that in Wilmington because of spacing issues. It is a much smaller space, if you can recall, so we'll most likely be moving that board meeting to Lake Placid here. There's a prevention team report. There's also 2 memorandums of agreement with the LPEA. Excuse me. And I just have a note that if you have not taken the opportunity to review the August 31st On Board magazine newspaper, has a lot of good information on COVID, as well as the conference, as well as, once again, picture of our own Brian Liam Kennelly. Are you getting royalties?
I should be.
That picture's gotten miles. It's animated. I think that's why they like it. So, but that's, there is a lot of good information in there. So, any question, feedback on information for the board? If not, we go on to Lincoln Goals for the agenda. It's back, folks. Thanks to Karen's help, I have the community involvement students first and foremost for the superintendent's report, and goal 6, finance, under the fund balance discussion. Anybody have anything else? If you do, please get those to Karen. Maybe once you get the goals in writing, spark some additional thoughts. Moving right along to the capital project update, there are 2 attachments. The August 17th contract summary spreadsheet, and then the other is a very disorienting photo of the middle high school auditorium. Took me a while to figure, what the heck is this? I looked at it sideways, I looked at it upside down, but that's amazing. That truly is amazing.
You need to see all the staff.
Oh,
I know, man, yeah, that's.
So, thank you. Any other comments on the capital project? The wall is coming along,
The wall is coming along.
looks better.
The wall looks great, I think. Who chose those rocks? I think it was us.
Their sign, the elementary school sign, it's a rock sign. I mean, it's not in yet, the actual digital part of it, but
Yeah.
the rock part of it.
Yeah, the sign is starting to look really nice. Yeah.
It looks great. It really does. What a wonderful improvement.
Yeah, I mean, probably the most exciting thing is to see the inside of the buildings getting turned back over to us rather than construction workers. So, much of the internal work is done. Like as with a lot of construction work, there are punch lists that still need to be completed. And, it seems like a list is made and addressed, and then you notice a couple of other things. And so, those are being worked on, but what we're trying to do right now is to maintain a separation between the construction process and teachers, teaching assistants, support staff, and then of course starting next week, students. So we're trying to manage that. So there are some pieces that are still left to be done, and we're holding off on some things because we don't want that to interfere in schooling or preparation for schooling. Other than that, we're still waiting on the completion of the roof. We had a successful repaving and completion of the elementary school loading dock. It's looking very good.
Waiting on the track.
Still waiting on the track, the track being lined, correct?
Lines, right,
Yeah, so
correct.
that the
Next
track
week.
surface is done,
Yeah.
but the lines aren't done. And then you've seen the wall growing. It still needs to be it built all the way up School Street towards the gymnasium, and you can see they're making progress on that piece too.
Roger, is the new entry to the elementary school completed so people can walk through there now, or?
Yes, so well, when you say completed, I would tell you that there's still a punch list on that with a couple of pieces still left to be done. But yes, the entrance is being used right now.
Yeah, I'd love to see it. I may pop down and I'd love to walk through it. Looks great.
Anything else on the project? Change order, there is one change order that's related to the sign, which with investigation, it does not require a vote. We did approve it on May 5th during our regular meeting, so it's there for your information. Discussion phase, reopening plan.
That's where you can see the video of the reopening.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. I see it.
Any comments? This is the time for your opinions or feedback.
I will say that I did tune into all 3 parent sessions, and I just felt they were very informative. There were a lot of really, I guess, thought-provoking questions that were asked. And I just felt that if I was a parent of a student now in the district, I would have left any of those meetings feeling pretty at ease and well-informed. So I thought they were all great, and I very much appreciate the team that put those together.
I echo that. That's good job. Well, if not, dashboard discussion. The proposed dashboard is now available. It's a attachment. Martha, are you taking the lead on this?
Sure. I had the idea of having a dashboard for us because there are so many numbers and facts that we look at, and like driving a vehicle, it would be nice if there were just a couple of 2-3 things that were good gauges of our health. And so what I'm proposing is that the virtual check engine light would be our projected budget shortfall due to the anticipated approximately 20% budget cut from the state. And then miles per gallon might be expenses per student. And Dana helped me to understand this, that general ed has a different expense per student than special ed. And so it's an average of 2. Another thing that we could consider as part of the dashboard is where we stand in terms of the tax percentage. I can't remember if it's the levy or it's the thing you found out for me. Tax levy, okay. We have one of the lowest tax levies around. I don't know if we knew that or not, but, and maybe that's not interesting or useful, but it just struck me as something that could be useful. So.
These are not meant to be comprehensive, as we discussed. Martha and I were on the phone and went through, especially the miles per gallon. And it was really interesting to drill down into all that information, actually see, percentage of our students compared to the state. It's like any rabbit hole that you start going down. They just keep, it's like an anthill.
Yeah.
You can go all over the place. But so how often are you proposing, or is it proposed that we throw these dashboards up? Is it every meeting?
Well, these figures are not going to change dramatically. Maybe quarterly at the most.
Okay. And how about if you want to throw in, I think it's a great idea to start touting information like the tax levy.
Yeah, for sure. I didn't know that. It's important.
Throwing that up under, I don't know, the TAC meter or something. I don't know what else you want.
Yeah.
So, just sort of quarterly, but if we have some information that we want to get out there, we put it under a dashboard.
Yeah,
Does anybody have graphic design skills that are superior to those I have? And would like to make it look better? No.
Is Dan, I heard that Dan might be sort of good at that.
Dan Piatt.
Yeah.
Oh, that's a great idea.
You hear that, Dan?
Piatt.
yeah, yeah.
Volunteering him already.
Hey.
That's just a rumor. I hope it's true. Any questions, comments about the dashboard?
No, I think it just goes back to that communication, right? And so I think we can do better communicating. Numbers have a way of communicating.
I also think visually, it's just really easy. It's compact. It's right there. I think it's just a visual thing. I think it's much easier to look at.
Great. Thank you for your work. Martha.
Yep.
Next up is succession planning. Included in the item under discussion was is that a policy or just a statement that was
It
written?
was, you know, a few years ago when the board was discussing succession and retention. We shared this document. This was really just the results of a work group, and something that the board, I think, utilized as a way of kind of guiding their movement forward on this.
And there is some additional work as was pointed out in the content here, that there are several avenues that we could go down in recruiting for a building administrator or a superintendent. You know, do we have BOCES do it? Do we do it ourselves? Do we hire a consultant? There's several avenues. So I'm not sure if this board would like to get together and actually map that out, or is that something that we table until the time comes and have a discussion at that point? So Martha did quite a bit of research and sent me several very comprehensive, somewhere upwards of 60 pages long, succession planning. So, and that went right from the root of, you know, retainment as well as searching for new employees. So I look forward to your feedback as to where you'd like to go with this. Anybody have any feedback?
Excuse me, I always like to be prepared for things, so I would hate to just have it happen and us have to figure it out.
Okay.
I was just gonna say, I don't wanna put it on the back burner and forget about it. until something happens, you know.
So I guess we could make a template per se on the building administrator versus superintendent, any other positions that you'd like to see on there? Those are probably the most.
Yeah, you know, in the past, we had athletic director.
Right.
And we had important business office personnel.
And then the next question is, how would you like to proceed with a ad hoc committee, with a document that
Start with the document.
put together
Google
the
Doc, yeah.
and Google Doc it?
Yep. Start with, is there already a prefab out there somewhere that we could be tweaking?
Well, we can start with what,
This is, yeah.
yeah, with this, and also incorporate the language which I believe you wrote, the content explaining the different avenues of which we could,
Yes, I believe I did.
so just taking
Yeah.
that, such as, let's see, recruiting from within, outside searches, and what would we like to do? What are the pluses and minuses of using BOCES as a clearinghouse, so to speak, for a superintendent search? What are the pluses, minuses? And then which option would we like to go with if perchance that happens in the next 5 to 10 years?
Maybe 10 years.
One of the candidates, okay. Was he specific to Saranac Lake or the district?
To the Adirondacks.
Um, We'll find a way. That might be part of this. Just, I have a vision of holding onto an ankle and just, that's our succession plan.
That's it, there you go.
Couple of boards and nails, just lock
There you
them
go.
in.
So,
I think we're straying from the topic here.
yeah,
Yeah.
sorry. What I'd like to do is, unless, would somebody like to spearhead this? If not, I can certainly put something together. I'm not going to set a timetable, but it'll be, let's say soon.
I'll support you in that. I want to spearhead.
Okay, I'll put something together and pass it by you. Anybody else? I mean, we'll definitely put something together, throw it on board, Google Docs, and then send out a message to everybody.
Yeah.
So, okay, great. Any other comments on that? If not, I'll go with Dana Wood, the Assistant Superintendent for Business, Finance, and Support Services. I couldn't wait to say that. Congratulations on that.
First, my apologies, this didn't get on until today. It kind of goes back to the crashing of the servers. All my files are on a server, not on the desktop. And sure enough, when I thought it was done last Thursday, realized that, oh geez, we have some additional revenue that was still planning on coming in. So making some tweaks to it, and sure enough, the system goes down Friday, so Joe finally get around to it. It's one of the many things to get files so that we can at least update it. So when you're looking at that first page, really, what you're the highlighting here is really just the nuts and bolts in terms of what we spent last year versus what we brought in. And you'll see that our revenue was just shy of $19 million. If you look at our budgets, originally we budgeted 19, and if you look at it, it's basically what the budget is, 19. There's a page here that gives you the general fund results of operation. Our budget was $19,388,637. That's what we budgeted revenue. That's what we budgeted for expenses. So we were about a little over $300,000 off our revenue, but part of that revenue is $520,000 of appropriated fund balance that we hope to not use. So really part of that is, so when you look at it and we take away the money that we were going to put forth, our revenue in itself was pretty good. You know, we basically brought in everything we expected to bring in. And a good portion of that is we did so well in some areas. The biggest one that stands out is our investment returns. I mean, we were well over $100,000 that we brought in revenue from investments, mainly tied to our bands that sat in our bank accounts, paying off, paying the project, and it sat in our bank accounts. So that's very positive in terms of our revenue. The expenses, lower than last year. Last year, we were a little over $18 million in terms of our expenses. This year, as it stands right now, and this is all unaudited. Our auditors have come through, and there's always tweaks as they go before they make their final report, going back and forth. But if anything, it's within a very small margin in terms of it. We're not going to see any, oh my goodness, where did that $1 million expense come from, or why did we lose that? It's usually at this point, an outstanding bill that is just coming through. You'd be surprised that we're still paying bills September 1st that, were issued end of June. And they're still coming in, so we're still trying to close out the books for June, for last year, June 30th, and it's September 1st. So as it stands right now, as of today, our expenses was $17.437 million, lower than last year. Obviously much lower than what we budgeted. And so when you see at the bottom of that page, what you're really seeing a difference in is about $1.3 million is what it comes down to for our revenue versus expenses. And a good portion of it is because we froze spending back in March because of the unknown. I mean, truly, one, we weren't doing field trips and sports and stuff like that, but we also said we can't do any additional expenses as it stands right now because of the unknown, not knowing what we were going to have to come up with for getting ready, for this year. The unknowns, because we built a budget for this coming year, and lo and behold, we find out after the budget's been approved that there's a potential of a 20% withholding of our state aid. And let me let you know that that's already begun. The governor has already started withholding state aid from us. The irony of it is the aid that he's holding back right now, so is aid that was earmarked for the previous year, the 1920 year. So it's not even money that is promised to us going forward. It was money that was already allocated to districts, two areas: advanced building aid and then excess cost aid. And what we've noticed as our payments came in for excess cost aid is we only got 80% of what we were supposed to get. And that's part of, and that does reflect revenue at this point. One of the things that we do as at the end is there's always receivables. There's always things that we say we're going to get, we haven't quite gotten it. State aid, BOCES aid. I mean, part of the revenue is we are told that we still are owed almost $200,000 in BOCES aid. Is the number that we got. We confirmed that with BOCES. We have another $30,000 supposedly, for excess aid. But there's a possibility that's not even going to come in. If the governor decides that, yes, I'm going to go with 20% cuts, part of that 20% cut in revenue has impacted the previous year. It's not even going forward. So, I mean, that's why I'm saying these numbers might change a little bit, because if we don't get the full aid that was promised us in excess costs, this will get adjusted down about a little under $20,000. Again, it's not a huge jump, but it's still going to be a change. And that hopefully we'll know by the time the auditors are done. Questions on that first page? Because it's a pretty, obviously a pretty significant difference between our revenue and our expenses. When you look at the next page, just kind of talks about it's the schedule. These are the various areas that we have, our liability reserves. We don't have anything in there. Our unemployment reserves in terms of what we've allocated or what we spent in that. It shows you that we do have some reserve encumbrances. In reality, what it comes down to is if you look at what we did not spend versus also add in what we had for unassigned fund balance, we're sitting at about $2.8 million in unassigned fund balance, or about 14.77% is what the second page is really showing you, is what we kind of have. Either we know the revenue is coming in or supposed to come in, or in revenue that we've already generated, and our expenses are for the most part set. And then the next page is basically just looking at the schedule change in fund equity, showing you, basically what it comes down to is where the balances were at July 1st versus July 1st, 2019, and at the end, June 30th, 2020. When we talk about this, and as Roger mentioned with our BOCES payment, $500,000+ that we've made, one of the options you're going to see here in terms of where we allocate some funds is for that, even though we paid it. But because we're talking about last year's budget, we're referring to something that happened prior to June 30th. The payment was made beginning of August. So really what, one of the options is to put money into a reserve accounts to then pay what we already just paid. Kind of, how you kind of working, figuring out the books. We've already paid it, but yet we need to still allocate that money. The money is there, but it's just how it all kind of rolls out in terms of where you put it in all the reserves accounts.
That's why I almost failed accounting in grad school.
And this is
Makes
where
no
it's
sense.
it's always the tricky part, because you're closing out one year, but you're already starting the second year. I mean, for us, come July 1, we're already purchasing and putting in requisitions for the next year's, because technically it's the next year, but yet we're still trying to close out and pay everything off from the previous year. So it's kind of like this balancing act. It's very interesting in the office, building office, trying to figure out, okay, this came in, when did it come in? Is it meant for the new budget, or was it meant for the old budget? And that's where we got to look at, when was it asked for? When was the purchase orders created? When was the work done? Is really what it comes down to. If the work was done prior to June 30th, it's got to go in. And the auditors look for that. In fact, that came up as they were going through the books, and they saw we had made a payment, one of our capital project payments, and the work was done like in April. We didn't get the invoice until July. So it kind of got rolled into the new year, and they said, oh, wait, it should have been last year's because of when the work was completed. Not the fact that the form that we got from Mosaic had them approving it on July something. Oh, no, it was a bill from back in April. That's why we have auditors, to kind of look at that, to ensure that we're doing it in assigning it the right way. The next page is really just a nice summary, quick results of operations, what we've spent versus what was budgeted. Again, you'll see there, year-end difference with revenue was about $389,000. When I look at that, I said we actually, we did well because we didn't tap into our, the appropriated fund balance. So we did what we thought we were going to do, if not, a little better. Because generally speaking, if you look at the previous years, our revenue usually is under, the 520, because again, the 520 is in case. And typically speaking, we don't necessarily always get all the little revenue pieces that we typically budget, but at the same time, our budget never gets paid. We don't spend everything we budget, and that's always a good thing. This year, obviously, we brought in a little more revenue, and we spent a little less. And that's where, in terms of looking at actual versus the difference between the two. Questions on the results of operations? And then the last page is really looking at a couple options, what to do with the money. Because what happens is, again, once it's decided, we let our auditors know this is where we want to move money around. Then we do the changes in the books, the journal entries to reflect it. If you look here, there are 4 options that I've given you. All 4 options have $510,000 being used for capital projects. Basically, last year we put money back into that reserve accounts to pay for the $700,000+ payments last August. So all 4 options is to do the same thing: move money back into that reserve accounts to then use it to pay the BOCES payments. So that's all 4 options. Option 2 has money going into $100,000 into EBLAR. We've done that on occasion the last couple of years, where we put money in there just to kind of have a nice healthy reserve there, so that as retirees come up, we have the money in terms of their buyouts, their payouts.
How is that looking, that account?
That's fairly healthy, and that's why it's really only one option, because I believe when looking at that, with right now what we have in that is a little over $1 million in that reserve account. That's why it was one of the options, but obviously it's not, for me, it wouldn't be one of the recommended options of putting more money in that. I think it's well funded at this point. I think we have other needs going forward where that money could go. Option 3 has us creating a new TRS reserve accounts. And I think one, that's, I think that probably the max that we can do. They talk about 2%. It's something, just a couple of years ago, the state has allowed schools to create these accounts, but they've capped it at 2% of total compensation for TRS employees. That's just, that's around $100,000 for us. But it's a good spot to put some money because in going forward, what we anticipate is our TRS account, our percentage is going to go up. I think this current year we budgeted about 9.6% because that's sort of what they said. I can easily see as we're standing building the budget for next year, that could be 10, 11, 12%. You know, they have to keep their fund healthy, and they're always looking at a 5-year average. And just 2 years ago, it was 10%. And the market took a sizable hit the last 6 months. So right now, I've envisioned that going from 9 point something. It could be a point, 2 points, 2.5 point increase. And this would be a way to potentially help offset some of that increase as budgets get tighter and revenue gets tighter. Option 4 is putting money in unemployment as well as the TRS, and then of course into the liability reserve. Gave that as an option, but again, it wasn't one that I was recommending just because our unemployment reserve accounts is pretty healthy. It's sitting at about $375,000. We really haven't touched it, and even during these last few months where unemployment claims came in, the claims that came across our desks were minor comparatively speaking. I mean, we made a decision to keep everyone fully employed that was under contract during the shutdown. So we didn't have many people that were looking at unemployment. The only ones that really filed were substitutes that rely on it, and for obvious reasons, they weren't getting the sub jobs. But other than that, we really we have not seen a large increase of claims as a result of the shutdown. Then goes back to option 3 when you're looking at it, giving us the greatest flexibility by putting a good portion of it in the unassigned fund balance, paying for the BOCES, starting the reserve account, basically maxing that out, but then putting the rest in the unassigned fund balance, because in the end, it's going to give us a nice, healthy, flexible way that if we don't have revenue this coming year, we can use it. Or next year, as we're building the budget and we anticipate a flat or if not a decrease in state revenue, it's a way to then offset any decrease there. Or even if the state revenue stays flat, then it's a way to look at, are we able to keep the tax levy pretty low, as low as possible, and use some of this excess funds to kind of, look at areas that we can pad, not pad like the budget, but pad for revenue sakes to kind of keep things lower. Keep the tax rate lower, tax levy lower going forward, looking at offsets for loss of revenue from the states, things like that. We obviously will lose some revenue this current year because of the events. Ironman generally, generates $30,000 to $40,000 in revenue, which we won't have coming in. Lacrosse, it's almost a wash. We end up making a couple $1,000s off the lacrosse tournament once we fix the fields and we water them and bring in turf management to restore them to get them ready for fall sports. Really does not generate a sizable amount of income for us, the lacrosse tournament. But that's why option 3 gives us the greatest flexibility to move money around that doesn't tie it up into specific accounts. Even though the governor has given districts the green lights to use some of their reserve money for COVID expenses. So he has provided districts with flexibility on how to tap into some of these reserve accounts if needed to pay for COVID.
So we could take money out of the unassigned balance to pay for PPE and that type of thing.
Yeah, it gives it the most flexibility if you have to. If there's a revenue shortfall, you make the decision to use some of the unassigned fund balance to cover that shortfall.
So we're always looking for justification as to why we're over the 4%.
Yes.
It's been BOCES for years.
Right.
So now it's,
It's the state.
well, and these times.
Right. I mean, when you look at it, you look at the dashboard, and if they truly is a 20% cut, we're looking at $370,000 in revenue that was budgeted that's not going to come in. That will quickly eat away at that unassigned fund balance. They get it down close to the 4%. And everything I'm hearing is there isn't a board around that has the ability to go above the 4%, isn't going to go above the 4%. For this very reasons. We don't know. There's some unknowns in the immediate future and 2 years out. Looking ahead, not just this current year, but also next year's budget and 2-3 years out.
I think it's smart to put as much money as we can in the TRS reserves for that.
Right, because that
reasons you
also
were
helps
saying.
us offset any increases in that account. Yes.
So that 2% that you said earlier, in that new account, is that 2% each year basically that you can max out?
I believe what I understand is it's 2% of whatever the total compensation is. So if we're spending $5 million in total compensation, we can only have 2% within the reserve accounts. So I don't think it's 2% every year. I think it's just a max of 2%. So we would be basically, if we go with this route, we would basically be, for the most part, maxing out in 1 year what we could put in there. But obviously, if you spend some, you can put it, back in to keep it at 100%. We did talk about a little bit the capital, putting money into a capital reserve as well, and that needs voter approval. So that's why I initially had it as part of an option, but it's a reserve account that needs voters to approve it. Therefore, I didn't think it was something that can be approved in September or
Right.
October if voters need to weigh in on it as to creating and putting, and because I've seen budgets out there where that's a proposition, where it says, $50,000, and it's just like the bus leasing proposition or the library proposition. It's a separate line that voters get to say yes or no to, that you're agreeing to the school to put in X number of dollars into the capital reserve accounts.
So if the board went with one of these options without the capital reserve fund, could the board later vote to put in the May election the creation of a
I
capital
would think
fund?
so, yes. I mean, I think
Okay.
that's where.
So they
most-
could make one decision now and one decision later.
Right.
Okay.
You can decide, yes, let's put it on as a proposition and say we want to put whatever $50,000, and have the voters vote on it.
Mhm.
Yes.
Be something to think about. Budget time,
Mhm.
election time.
That's closer to, we'll have a better look in the rearview mirror, so to speak, of what happened. So, any questions, comments? Very thorough, thank you very
Yeah,
much.
thorough, thank you.
That's great.
Will the board be invited to vote on this at some point in the near future?
Sure. I mean,
Or,
After
I
this
think you
audit,
want to wait
right?
for the audit because
So you-
I
so-
tried to, make sure I indicated unaudited.
so late August, late
Yeah,
October.
because right now, I think they're planning on having their audit done and present early October, I believe, right? I think that's what you said the last meeting. So having something around there once
Got
the
it.
numbers are finalized and what happens is I will communicate, if there's oh yeah, for this, I let telling associates no, Sam no, and then we do the journal entries to reflect before we close the actual books out. The money gets moved into these accounts
Mhm.
prior to closing the books out, so that it will reflect going forward as of July 1, different numbers because of where we put money.
Anything else? Meeting minutes, that's under the consent agenda, personnel matters, 9A has been postponed. 9B is a teaching staff long-term medical leave of absence upon recommendation of the superintendent. Accept the medical leave of absence of Patricia Uliva, teacher at the elementary school, effective September 1st, 2020, for approximately 60 days. May I have a motion to accept this leave?
Make that motion.
Thank you. Second.
Yeah.
Thank you. Discussion,
Would be this.
Roger. had a Nice write up there. Little known fact, probably for most of you, that when I returned to this area in 1990s, I became a school physical therapist, and Pat was one of the people that I always look forward to seeing when I went in the building. She was always jabbing at me a little bit in a friendly manner, but also showed me around, introduced me to other teachers. She was sort of that welcoming face for a lost soul that I was in that environment. So I don't even think she knows that, but I will write her a note. Thank her very much. She will truly be missed.
She was my kindergarten teacher.
Is that right? And I guess I would like to say that I think she's been the kindergarten teacher for generations here in Lake Placid, and you know what an impact she's had on this community. So on individuals like you, Liam, but also, and Rick, but also on the community at large. And that's what a great teacher does. And that's who Pat Uliva is. She's a great teacher. She will be, I agree, she'll be missed.
I want to know how many miles she put up in those years.
Yeah.
She had a lot of decompression time.
Yes.
Pat is definitely one of those teachers that you hope that you hear your children say someday that this was the woman that was very impactful on their lives, even at the kindergarten level. So she definitely is just a lovely, talented woman, and we will miss her for sure.
Thank you. Any other comments? If not, are we voting online?
Yes.
Okay. Please vote. And Colleen can vote as well.
Yes.
Okay, great.
I don't see it, but I'm voting. I'm saying yes.
Are you logged into Board Docs?
Oh, never mind. I've got the second computer going. I apologize.
I voted for you.
So that's, are they all?
Yes, that's 7-6, yes.
So Roger, she's doing a medical leave for 60 days and then piggybacking that with retirement. Is that what that means?
Well, I'll be able to share more with you later.
Okay.
Next is a long-term teaching staff appointment. Recommended action upon the recommendation of Superintendent Brianna Courier, hereby appointed to a long-term position of kindergarten education teacher in elementary school, replacing Patricia Uliva, beginning September 1st, 2020 for approximately 60 days. Salary will be $48,438, step 1, master's plus 42, prorated for the 2020-21 school year based on the salary schedule and negotiated agreement of the LPEA dated July 1st, 2020 through June 30th, 2023. This service will not be credited towards tenure. I have a motion for this. staff.
Yeah. Yes.
Colleen, second.
Okay.
Thank you, Martha. Any discussion, comments? If not, please vote.
Six, yes.
6 yes, 0 no, the motion passes. Long-term teaching appointment upon recommendation of the superintendent. Fred Lesser is hereby appointed to long-term position of special education teacher in the elementary Elementary School, replacing Jason Hubbard for the 2020-21 school year. Salary will be $49,698. Step 1 plus 60 for the 2020-21 school year based upon the salary schedule of the negotiated agreement of the LPA dated July 1st, 2020 through June 30th, 2023. The service will not be credited towards tenure. Thank you, Joe. Second? And discussion?
He's gonna be your neighbor, but
What's that?
he's gonna be your neighbor.
Oh, he is? Teaching appointment, teaching assistant appointment, sorry. Upon recommendation of the superintendent, appoint Marjorie Watterson, level 1 teaching assistant to the position of teaching assistant, replacing Amy Cheney Seymour in the tenure area of teaching assistant for a probationary period of 4 years, commencing September 1st, 2020 through August 31st, 2024. Salary of the 2020-21 school year is step 2, level 3, $26,960 of the LPEA negotiated agreement dated July 1st, 2020 through June 30th, 2043. May I have a motion to approve this?
Yes.
Colleen, second, please.
Second.
Thank you, Lee. Discussion?
I think it's always great when we have an alumni return that's qualified and wants to work in our district. I just think it's great fun. I'm excited for her.
My only question is, the resignation comes later. Is that permissible? And we're filling a spot? That's not. Okay.
It's in the holding pattern.
You know, okay.
It's not
You
like
okay with
we
that?
pass them.
That's usually your
How do
technicality.
you wanna vote?
Yes.
Rick hasn't. Oh, anyhow, 6 yes.
Okay. 6 yes, 0 no, the motion passes. Teaching assistant appointment upon recommendation of the superintendent, appoint Kelsey, is it Lippert?
Lippert,
Lippert? Okay. Certification pending to the position of teaching assistant in the tenure area of teaching assistant for a period of 4 years, commencing upon completion of certification as a teaching assistant for approximately 4 years. Salary for the 2020-21 school year is step 1, level 3, $26,674 of the LPA negotiated agreement dated July 1st, 2020 through June 30th of 2023. May I have a motion for this assistant appointment?
Yeah.
Thank you, Dan. Second?
Second.
Martha, any discussion? Questions? None, please vote.
six yes.
Motion passes 6-0. Long-term teaching assistant appointment. On recommendation of the superintendent, appoint Emily Fishner as long-term teaching assistant, replacing Maria Courier, beginning September 1st, 2020, for approximately 60 days. Certification in the area of childhood education. Initial and SWD grades 1 through 6. Salary is step 6, level 3, $28,200. Of the LPEA negotiated agreement dated July 1st, 2020 through June 30th, 2023. The service is not credited towards tenure. May I have a motion for this appointment?
Yes.
And second, Colleen, is that okay? Discussion? Please vote.
6 yes.
Okay, motion passes 6 yes. 0 against. And busy over in that building, haven't you? Teaching assistant resignation upon recommendation of the superintendent, accept the resignation of Amy Cheney Seymour, teaching assistant at the middle and high school effective September 1st, 2020. Motion for this resignation.
Yes.
Martha?
Yep.
Second?
Yep.
Any questions, comments? If not, please vote.
6 yes.
Motion passes 6-4-0 against. Teaching assistant resignation upon recommendation of the superintendent. Accept the resignation of Sherry Robinson, teaching assistant at the middle and high school effective September 1st, 2020. May I have a motion for this resignation?
I'll second.
Joe, discussion?
Six yes.
Thank you. 6-4-0 against, the motion passes. I'd like to track what the effect this pandemic has had on how many positions that we've
Mhm.
lost or gone on.
Yeah, it's having an impact.
Oh, certainly.
Mhm.
Certainly is. Under additional action items, we have the policy second read and adoption. The policies that were first read last meeting. The resolution is be it resolved that having given the public an opportunity to be heard at a public meeting on the subject of the proposed changes to policies noted above, the Board of Education hereby adopts the said policies with any proposed changes. May I have a motion to adopt these policies, please?
So moved.
Thank you, Martha. May I have a second?
Yeah.
Is that who you got?
I got Martha and Dan.
Okay.
Didn't you ask them to wait on the 4765 one?
I did recommend tabling 4765. And that was in order to gather feedback from our teachers, which I believe is a piece of that discussion that we didn't follow through with before. And so if we could approve this group without that, we could then follow up with
So
that piece.
the revision would be to remove 4765.
Yeah.
Martha and Dan, are you okay with that?
Yeah.
Do we need to vote again, Karen?
So
Okay. Okay, catch up with myself here. Goals and objectives approval, we're under consent agenda. Just a note, I went in and made the last revision. I think Joan had put in a note of 2 to of, or of to 2. And that was,
Thank you.
change was made, so whatever in Google Docs at this time is the document. Thank you. Special education, that's under consent. Are there any questions for the September 15th packet, which is a little smaller than it is, having been in on that process, is a ton of work.
Yeah.
I appreciate your point earlier. The good of the cause, any,
no, there's no email.
so we'll enter the adjournment phase. Our next meeting, the next meeting's date is September 15th, 2020. Right here. Or
Does this
will
work
this
for
be
everybody?
available? Okay. October 6th was Wilmington, as discussed previous. Pending miraculous changes in our environment. We're looking, moving that here as well. And then October 20th. Old business, I believe everything's been taken care of. Any new business? If not, we'll, the recommended action would be to a motion to adjourn the meeting.
I mean, that's so.
Thank you, Liam, second.
Yeah.
All in favor?
Hi.
Colleen? She's left. Oh, she's-
Hi. Sorry, I had my mute on.
She was waiting to vote. I wasn't looking at that.
We are adjourned. Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
friends. Have a great evening.
Thanks,
You too,
Colleen.
Colleen.
Thank you.
Thank you.